in almost 3 years. The last time you remember, the disputed re-election of President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad sent thousands of people out onto the streets. The opposition is not taking part in this vote. They've either been banned or are actively boycotting the poll. A reminder of my guest tonight, Fariba Hartoudi is an Iranian journalist and writer who's been in France since her teens. Ramin Parham is an outspoken critic of the Iranian regime, also an author. Here on my left, Hamdan Mostafavi, a journalist and Iran specialist at the Courier International. In Washington, Patrick Clausen's at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. And in Bahrain tonight, Genevieve Abdo is from the Inside Iran Project. Many thanks indeed to you all. Now, I want to talk a bit about the opposition, if I may. Let's talk to you, Hamdan. The Green Movement, they were called. We saw all of them out on the streets dressed in green. It was quite inspirational to many people. It was put down very, very quickly. Since then, we've heard barely anything from the Green Movement, whereas elsewhere in the region, of course, there have been successful uprisings.
Yeah, of course, it's a bit difficult for the Iranians to see what happened in the rest of the Middle East and what happened to them. But I wouldn't say like you that it went out very quickly. They resisted as long as they could. It was really before the election in June 2009, you could see people really believing this time in the election and going. There were so many people in the stadium to hear Mousavi speaking. And they tried for some time, for 6 months maybe, and then they tried to do civil disobedience, and
it was put down very violently, perhaps.
Yeah, now they've been arresting so many people, and if you have any involvement in those movements, it's very, very hard. But I think really Iranians have been, searching for maybe 100 years and more for some form of government that would really represent them, and now. Well, this has been stopped for a while, but you see every 10 years, every 20 years, people coming back on the street and asking for more representation. And even if now it's a bit Mousavi and Karoubi, the leaders of the Green movement, are still assigned to.
They're under house arrest, aren't they?
House arrest for a year now, and they have no possibilities to communicate with very few possibilities to communicate with the world, but.
And the regime obviously saw them as a big threat, didn't they? Because they, as I say, they put the unrest down. But since then, Amnesty International and others say there have been many arrests, many people detained.
Definitely.
They've really made an effort to make sure that this doesn't happen again, haven't they?
Definitely. And after 2009, on my last essay, which is a kind of biography of Ali Khamenei, of the Supreme Guide, I had the chance to interview a former commander of the Pastoran of the army, the Revolutionary Guard, and the section Quds, which is the section of the extra, let's say, terrorism, in one word. Believe me, after 30 years that I'm following quite, would I say, day by day what's going on in my country, home country, native country, what he told me about the repression this past 5 years, and especially after 2009, thanks, I would say, entre guillemets, thanks to the Russian, it's absolutely unbelievable. It's why...
Thanks to the Russians in terms of...
They're helping them. I
material
mean,
support.
The former KGB and the new... How they call it now, I don't know any more than the name of the secret services of Mr. Putin, but they are there and they are really helping the top officials of the secret services in Iran to handle any kind of even small demonstration in cities,
right.
and how to keep people, how to threaten them, how to...
Well, they're very thorough, aren't they? I mean, Amnesty says that they've actually got a cyber police force now who can see what people are looking at on the internet. People can't even talk about the possibility of protesting. I mean, it's Big Brother
everywhere,
there, isn't it?
And even in the jails, because as you may know, that is also something that I find in details, thanks to this guy, that corruption helps a lot. All the movies and the pictures and that we could get out of the jail, it's thanks to the corruption. And now they have secret services for their own person that they are living.
Right.
I mean, everybody is watching everybody. As you say, big brothers everywhere. And all that comes from the La Demeure du Guide, the house of the guide, which is a state in the state, which is in the middle of Tehran. And they had centralized everything in this particular house.
Genevieve Abdo, it's an extraordinarily paranoid regime, isn't it? It's difficult to see how the opposition movement, the Green movement or otherwise, could reassemble and come back as some kind of political force.
Yes, definitely. And it's, I mean, the regime has very, very effectively, shut down the movement, I mean, for the most part. And the greatest technique that it uses, of course, is its cut-off communication. And we haven't mentioned this yet, but in the recent weeks, in the run-up to this election, they've made it. One day they completely shut down the internet. I mean, shut it down. I mean, forget about filtering or whatever. There was no internet access. So they've been very effective, as it was just mentioned, with the help of the Russians. They've pumped enormous amounts of money into being able to cut off all communications. So we have an opposition movement that doesn't really have much recourse. And I think that, unfortunately, this is going to be the situation for the near future, unless some unpredictable event, something unforeseen happens.
Yeah, they are planning, indeed, as she said, to cut off the internet and have a national internet that would not be linked to the rest of the world, and they've been working on that.
A national web rather than a worldwide
they've been
web.
working on that for a year, and now they wanted to launch it right now, but it's been delayed a little bit. But I think by May or June it will be launched, so Iranian will be cut off from the world, really. So.
And as you say, Iran has a very strong intellectual tradition, doesn't it? How can people in Tehran, the elite that people speak of, how can they live under these conditions? I expect more and more people will be leaving.
The internet is a very important issue, there is no doubt about it. But more important than the internet issue, and in general, to break the information stranglehold of the Iranian people put on by the regime, to break that thing. One very effective weapon is satellite TV. One very effective weapon is this. That is, if we live in democracies, if we believe in democracy, if we believe in power and counterpower and checks and balances, and if we believe that this is the regime that is the world's #1 state sponsor of terrorism, the major geopolitical crisis-making terror state, which is going nuclear, we need to open up media platforms to figures who can criticize this, who can bring different views, who can explain to the Iranian people what are the stakes. That is, we need to open up media space to Iranian opposition figures so that they can talk.
And they are very afraid of that, as you can see, because they've been harassing all the people working for BBC Persian, the TV. So they've been arresting all the people contributing to that channel in Iran, and harassing their family and their friends. If there is a suspicion you are working for this English channel, then you are arrested.
So they act preemptively. Patrick Clausen, given the situation we're talking about here, should the West have done more, and should it be doing more to assist the opposition in Iran as it has done elsewhere in the region?
Well, I don't think the West's role is going to be primary here. And if I may offer a note that while I quite agree with the other guests that the prospects look very bad for the democratic-minded opposition in Iran, there is one noted observer of the Iranian scene who disagrees with us, and that is the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, who is constantly worried that there is going to be a soft overthrow, a cultural invasion, which will lead to a quick overthrow of his regime. And I think he knows something about the country. And indeed, for many years, when he warned that this was a prospect, that I thought that he was greatly exaggerating. Yet what we saw in 2009 is that he was correct, and that he understood his country quite well. So at the moment, things look very bleak. But things could change quite quickly, as we saw in 2009. I don't think there's much the West can do besides what your guests have called for, which is to say satellite television. The Iranian government is violating international agreements by the way it's jamming satellite uplinks, and Western governments have complained about this, but haven't taken very vigorous stances to stop Iran from this illegal blocking of jamming of satellite uplinks, and we should be doing more about that. But let's be honest, our role on this is going to be relatively modest. It's going to be the Iranian people themselves who are going to be the key actors here.
Yes, I fully agree with the fact that it is up to the Iranian people and the political elite and intellectuals to do the job. There is no doubt about it. I mean, the West is not going to do the job for us, but the West has a major role, contrary to what Patrick Clausen just said. And the role is to say that, to show that, to prove that what the regime is saying is not correct. The regime is saying the West is selfish. The West should show to the Iranian people that, yes, we do have interest, but we have self-interest and enlightened self-interest. And right now, we have enlightened self-interest in Iran because our interests are tied up to your interests, to the interests of the Iranian people. The way to do that is to tie up sanctions to human rights. The way to do that is to send a strong
Rather than
signal
the
to
nuclear
the
program.
people.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's it.
and to open up the media space, tie up sanctions to human rights, and show to the Iranian
But
people.
are the sanctions helpful in themselves in that they've, Iranian business people are finding it very difficult now to work because they've been shut out of the international banking system. People, they're asking to be paid for oil
We
in
have
gold.
to
and
show, we have to
dollars.
show that we are not
the economy's
going
being
to,
choked off.
The West has to show,
That's hurting the regime?
the West has to show that the West is not going to abandon the people once the technical nuclear issue has been solved, just as the West did it in a fully different situation in '91.
No, we shouldn't be. We shouldn't be.
But
I mean,
the main job is
I don't-
up to the Iranian
Yeah,
opposition.
but,
You have attempts that are being made right
Right.
now in order to unite the opposition. Three
It's-
different attempts,
Very
serious attempts are being made.
It is utopic to think that the West, of course, they look after their own interest and the interest of their own people, which is normal, by the way. Look what's going on in Syria. We can't say that the situation in Iran is right now worse than in Syria. And the West still think about the geopolitical what I say interest is not just the interest because they want oil or whatsoever, but because in fact they have to look after the world. They decided the West are the one that sometimes they put the world in a big trouble, like Iraq. I mean, we should also be a little bit how can I say
Cautious.
But if Iran,
exactly, because I don't want the West helping Iran as they try to help Iraq. That is also another problem that we shouldn't
What about how they help Libya?
underestimate the Iranian population. I've been there 2 years ago, and believe me, from in Tehran, as well intellectual circle, as well as in very small cities, they would told me if we look at Iraq, thanks, no, we don't want any help. When I agree to say that the West, but who is the West? I don't believe in West government that they will go and help either. They have to look to their own interest. I believe, on the other hand, the people of the West, let's say, and all the NGOs or the civil society, they should help us, in fact. And the first issue in Iran should be human rights. But, I mean,
Linking sanctions to human rights
that's
is a
it.
state
But that is
effort.
also
It's not a civil society
it is
effort.
our job to do it first and to show that we are
sure.
behind.
I
Iran.
don't
one is
really
asking for
agree
weapons.
totally with you both. I do, but in some sense, I would say that the West is already having a big role today because with the sanctions that are that Iran is facing right now, the Iranian people are the people suffering from this sanction. I think we all know that everything is imported in Iran. Many goods are from other countries, so people have trouble to pay them because they.
But do you think Iranians blame the West for that, or do they blame
That's
their
the
regime?
question. If they are really angry, they might be angry with this regime who is complicating the relation with the West, or they might be nationalist and say, okay, that's the West's fault. We'll see what that comes after the sanctions have been there for some time. But I think the West has a role in this way. But should the West talk to Iran and try to find some solution like in North Korea, or should they continue to isolate Iran as they are doing? That's also a question.
What's your view on that, Genevieve Abdo?
Well, I think that, from the kinds of information that we're getting from inside the country, in fact, it seems that at least some part of the population is blaming the regime for the economic hardship and for sanctions, not necessarily the United States. Now, I think that if there is a military attack on Iran, that will completely change this equation. I think that President Obama, for the most part, has done a fairly good job, especially in the last Nowruz address he gave, in trying to separate the regime from the Iranian people. So he said in this address, and he's tried in his administration to make this distinction, that while we have all of these complaints against the regime, whatever we do is not targeted against the population. And I think that that has penetrated in a way that it hasn't in the past within the population. Now, again, if there is some sort of military attack, I think that you will see the population completely turn against the West, and you will see a lot more support for the regime simply because people are frightened and they feel threatened. But I also think that there are some Iranians who would welcome some sort of intervention simply because, now there's a big debate about this. I mean, there was just a meeting of the opposition recently in Stockholm, Sweden, and this is something that they debated quite fiercely. Do we want to have a military attack or not? Some people, believe it or not, argue, well, maybe that's a good thing. I mean, so I think that there are a lot of differing views on that sort of weighs the disadvantages, of course, of an attack versus the possibilities.
All right. This election then taking place at a very tense time for Iran. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. We are going to have to leave it there. Many thanks indeed. Fariba Hatroudi, Ramin Param, Hamdan Mostafavi, Patrick Clausen and Genevieve Abdo. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thanks to you for watching. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow for The World This Week. Don't go away.